near Bowie, and they were there because they wanted to be. They chose not to be with us in school. The black students who were in our town didn't have a choice. They had to leave. They could not go to school with us, but they would go to school at Hilly Branch, Hilly Branch Community, if you're familiar with that. That's where our school systems career center is now. So that was three things. We stayed because we were the largest population. Otherwise, had we been the smallest group, we wouldn't have had a school. We wouldn't have been in school. But the segregation was present. For myself, going to eat somewhere other than Pembroke didn't happen very often. I grew up on a farm. My father was a tenant farmer, and my whole life was work. From fourth grade, had perfect attendance first, second, third grade, and then fourth grade until my senior year. I never got grades the first grade period of the school year, so we didn't have money to go to other places, or even an occasion to go to other places. And sometimes we would go with the church. I can recall that. We would go to the beach once a year. Our church would take our young people. And we were always in a separate area and cooked in a separate area from other groups. So that I knew that was unusual, not in the sense that I was accustomed to anything else, but it was what I'd always experienced. And then shopping for grocery, that kind of thing, as I aged with my mother. We could buy food in Lumberton, Red Springs, or wherever, but we couldn't eat it in any of the places where you could buy it. And that was the way it was. And it was not comfortable. It was not a comfortable feeling for me, and it certainly was not comfortable for my mother. And that, I think, had so much to do. And the fact that my mother only went to second grade, not even all of second grade, I think is part of the reason that I have such a love for education. My father could have finished high school, he chose not to. His father was a minister, and they lived near where the university is now. A lot of people boarded with them and went to school there, but my mother didn't. My mother stopped school, she told me, in second grade to become, and these were her words, a washerwoman. Second grade now, that's what, maybe 6, 7 years old, for the white families in town, so that she could earn some money to help her mother. And that was, when I say present in my life, I always knew that segregation was there, that separation by color. And I learned over time that there were other kinds of segregation even within our community, that there were people who segregated and relegated you to a lower class status because you didn't belong to this family, or you didn't live in this part of Pembroke. As crazy as that sounds, it's not even a big town.
I'll pick up
But
on
that was
that in the
present.
third question. Joining us is Rosa Winfrey, and she is one of the panelists. And Rosa, I'm going to let you pick up and tell what we were talking about first, if you feel to tell something about yourself, and then tell what you felt personally growing up, and we'll let you talk as much as you want to.
Thank you. I grew up on a tobacco farm 1 mile north of Pembroke. And I was the youngest of 6 children. I guess we were blessed in that my parents owned their own land. So I was able to attend school regularly. But very often back then we had short days of school where the students were allowed to go home and work on the farm. And sometimes I would go to my class and there would be only 4 or 5 students, but the teachers still taught. But my first interaction about prejudice and discrimination was, I was going through a nearby town with my parents, and my dad said, "This is surely a haughty town." And I said, "What does haughty mean?" And he went, like he shouldn't have said that. And he didn't answer me. And when I got home, I looked it up in the dictionary, and it meant prejudice. And so our people really felt the discrimination very strongly, because at my age, back then, it was very difficult. But another incident, I remember my mother was in J.C. Penney's, and she was just an accomplished seamstress, but we always went to J.C. Penney's to buy remnants of material to use, and she made all of our clothes. And I remember how the clerks would follow her, just like she was going to steal. And it really touched me. It just, here was my mother, a good woman, and here clerks were following her. And it just shattered me. But we had we called the buses where the white students that lived in Pembroke, they attended Red Springs schools, so they passed our home daily, and we called it the white bus. And there was an incident of one of our families living in Detroit and coming back to Pembroke, and their youngster waiting for the bus, and the bus came by, and they said, "Oh, that was the white bus." And he said to his parents later on, he said, "They called that a white bus, but it was yellow." But I heard my mother talk a whole lot about how before the roads were paved, that the bus driver would intentionally drive through the mud puddles and splash mud on them as they walked to school. But she had a dad that was passionate about our people and cared about them, and so he went to the Board of Education and brought that as an issue, so it stopped. But I had teachers. I had a teacher in the 7th grade. Pembroke had grades 1 through 7 when I was coming along, and I had a teacher who was fired almost every year. So in the 7th grade, he was my teacher in the 7th grade, and then when I went to the 8th grade, he was my teacher again. And I often wondered, why would they fire him at Pembroke Graded School, and then he would come to Pembroke High School? But when I was an adult, he was a super teacher, so he always came back, and he would get a group of us and we'd go out to dinner, and I asked him, "Why were you fired?" And he said, "Simply because I tried to start a coalition between Indians and blacks so that we could outnumber the whites." So they charged him with all kinds of reasons that he was being fired. But I often thought, if you're not good enough to teach at one school, why would you be placed in another?
Right.
But he was superb. He left Robeson County during integration, went to Cleveland, Ohio, and was a troubleshooter. He was one of the best principals there ever was. And I told him once, I said, I've been through first grade and graduate school. He was the best teacher I ever had. He was before Skinner about behavior modification. But you know what? I'm finding that racism and discrimination in my home county is alive and well.
Amen.
We're gonna get into that, and then that'll pick up stuff, but give you a break for a moment, Rosa, and we're gonna pick up in the third part of that, we'll get into that. And the ladies share with us what, you know, health was like, what education, you've touched on education, but what was religion, what role did the church, and the community as a whole, where was segregation, as it involves, touch on the economics, and you mentioned that, Dr. Lowry, about what it was like, you were not only just segregated by ethnicity or color, but there was others, and pick up on that, and also with your community also, and pick up and like talk about healthcare. We haven't heard what healthcare was like for us, and what did segregation, the role segregation played in healthcare, in our education, our religion, and economic development, jobs, or who could own property and who couldn't. So, Julie.
When we talk about health, my mind goes back to the